Hello, everybody. This is Steel Rose's podcast. This podcast was created for women by women to elevate women's voices. I am very honored to introduce you to our guest today. Today we have Karolina Rzadkowolska. She is a best-selling author of Euphoric, Ditch Alcohol and Gain a Happier, More Confident You. It's an empowering book on how ditching alcohol will revolutionize your body, mind, and soul with no rock bottom story needed. Karolina believes that reevaluating the role of alcohol in your life is one of the most empowering choices an intuitive person can make that allows them to better align with their bigger dreams and deepest values. She's a master coach, certified and trained in multiple modalities, and has worked with thousands of clients through her online programs and coaching to change their drinking habit and unleash their deeper purpose. Karolina also certifies new coaches in her ICF-approved Empowered AF Coach certification program. Karolina, welcome to Steel Roses. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm so excited.
So Karolina, I was thrilled when you reached out because personally, on a personal level, like my husband and I gave up alcohol about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, something to that effect. So I loved when you reached out to be on because I'm like, this is something that's a big deal. We have our feelings about it, but I would love for you to share with the listeners your focus for your work, and information that you think that they really need to hear about your coaching program and any details that you want to share with them.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, I think alcohol is one of the oddest topics that we have in our culture because it's like a very taboo topic, right? Like we only talk about it whether it's gone kind of too bad and, someone's drinking way too much and they need to go to rehab and AA and all those kinds of things. Other than that, everything's normal. Everybody drinks. We go to all socializing and stuff like that. And I feel like there's been this really black and white way of treating alcohol, the way that we almost don't do with any other kind of lifestyle kind of practice that we do. And so what my work really focuses on is asking questions of, but does alcohol serve me, right? I don't have to compare myself to anybody else. I don't have to label it a problem. I don't have to do anything like that. Is it serving me? And I'm finding that more and more intuitive women, especially as we're getting older and more health conscious and, we're not out partying like we were in our 20s, we really do want a lifestyle that's aligned with our health, aligned with our values, aligned with mindfulness, aligned with being present with our kids, and also aligned with our deeper dreams. I work with so many women who have really big dreams and visions. And I mean, if we really think about it, just very logistically, does drinking set you up to feel like $1 million the next day? Does it make you wake up and say, I'm on fire, I'm going to go, tackle the world? Of course not, right? Biologically, there's not a single human on this planet that wakes up feeling amazing after drinking. And so yet we buy into this kind of cultural institution that you have to drink and it has to be part of your life. And we all know the negative consequences. We feel them. We know them. We feel them even more, especially as we're getting older. It disrupts our sleep. It completely, makes us feel foggy and groggy the next day. It can even last for many weeks. We can kind of go into the science of that as well on the show if you'd like. But I think some of us have that kind of love-hate, it's like, oh, I like this as a treat, maybe to, mark the end of the day, or it's nice to have a few drinks with friends, but then there's that hate aspect as well. And so I think what my work is really for is that intuitive person who really wants to explore that, really wants to evaluate that, really wants to get curious about that. And because we're so indoctrinated in this culture of drinking as such a normal part of our lives, it's actually very rare in our society for people to take a long extended break away from alcohol. It's getting much more popular today, thank God, because of things like Dry January and just the Sober Curious movement is really getting big. But kind of typically, traditionally, most people would have never taken a break from alcohol in their lifetimes other than pregnancy, right? Which is a whole other kind of thing. And so really my work is inviting people to question, does alcohol serve me? And why don't I explore what it feels like to try on the alcohol-free lifestyle? And that's really what I did. I had one of those complicated relationships with alcohol that brought me a lot of that love-hate, but it was nowhere near one of those rock bottom stories. And so I think because it wasn't a rock bottom story, I didn't allow myself the even permission to explore living alcohol-free because I just had this belief system that all adults must drink. So if I want to be a normal adult, I better put up with that, right? And obviously I used alcohol to have fun and relax and all those kinds of things, which we will talk about because we can completely debunk all of those beliefs about what alcohol serves us to do. And so when I first tried a dry January, that's like my first time I had this aha moment of like, oh, this is what it actually naturally feels like to just be alive without alcohol in your system. And I wasn't drinking every day by any means. It was actually only a weekend thing for me at that point in my life. And just having a whole month without any weekends with alcohol was phenomenal. I drank again that February, and like that contrast that I felt immediately to the dry January was so like a big contrast. The sleep sucked. I felt so groggy the next day. And I even noticed in the moment after having a drink, I actually got cranky and frustrated and impatient. And I was like, wait a minute, I thought I was drinking to have fun and have a good time. Like, this is not lining up to what I expected. And it was after that that I really dug deep into my alcohol beliefs and really, tried on the alcohol-free lifestyle in a more serious way. And, I've been alcohol-free ever since, which is about almost 7 years. It's going to be coming up pretty soon. And I think what is so brilliant about this work is that, again, the more we are getting conscious about health and our values and living a life according to our personalities and our unique intuitions, it's like this whole byline that drinking is just what you do and everybody does it. It's like we're kind of rebelling against that. And I think that's really, really cool. And it doesn't mean you have to stop drinking for forever either. It's just like, why don't we try this on and see how it feels for me? And while it might be hard in the first like week or two, like the benefits start compounding at such an exhilarating rate that you get high on this new life, and it just gets better and better and better. And which I find we can talk about too, is that like people actually get really honed in on, what do I really want for my life? It's like a really good self-discovery time, and like really the big questions kind of get answered, and like people go on to do incredible things as a result of this journey.
So I want to touch on like so many things that you just talked about. I'm going to refer to my notes now. I want to talk about the science behind it first, because I think that people hear when we talk about like, you can really do so much more when you're alcohol free, and they disregard that as like, all right, whatever, sure, or, oh yeah, it's like kind of hippie, like, oh yeah, you feel good, love, whatever. And it gets kind of disregarded. Like, really, honestly, people don't take it seriously, but that's a real thing. So I want to talk about that too, but because I think people need to hear the actual science here. There's a legitimate effect. So yes, like we're told like, oh, hey, drink alcohol, you can relax. It relaxes you. Technically it doesn't. So I know we'll talk about that. Hey, have a drink, you'll have more fun. Okay, sure, because you're losing your senses a little bit. You might loosen up a little bit more. But the reality of it is, like my husband and I say, and we're like, I mean, people now are like, you guys are old farts, and they make fun of us. But we tell our family members, we're like, you're literally drinking a poison. Like that. I mean, that's the only way we talk about it in our house. And our kids have now grown up hearing that too. And so the times that we've had people here, and we're not going to tell people not to drink. It's their business. They're always like, oh, they're drinking. And we're like, yeah, listen. And we explain to them like, some people do it. We don't do it. We choose not to. And I want to talk about like the actual physical, like when you drink, what's happening in your body? How long is this alcohol lasting in your body? And, what does all that mean for the individual when they are having that drink and then consistently drinking?
Let's take a quick break.
Are you interested in podcasting but not sure where to start? My name is Jenny Benitez, and I'm here to help guide you through your podcast launch and maintenance. Check out the link in the episode description for Podcasting Unboxed, your comprehensive startup guide. I am very excited to work with you.
Yeah, so good. So there's so many elements to dive into, but I think I'll focus on the ones that were the most like shocking and the most eye-opening to me. So first of all, yes, a lot of people drink to relax. It comes to be kind of like a ritual at the end of the day. I think we live way too overproductive lives. Modern society like necessitates that we're always on. And so, having this like, you come home, you pour a glass, like the ritual has come to mean I'm going to relax now, right? And so we have this real big cultural assumption as well that alcohol helps relax us. So what immediately happens when we drink alcohol, alcohol is a depressant. And so what it does is slowly slows down our nervous system, which actually is not relaxing it the way that like you think. It's turning it off, right? It's completely closing off your senses, which is kind of scary when you actually really think about it that way. You're just becoming numb in essence. But our bodies are really smart. And so in the response to that, we actually release stress hormones every single time we drink alcohol. Those are trying to wake us back up from that kind of death the body thinks it's going through. And so our body releases cortisol, adrenaline, and something called dynorphin when in response to alcohol. Dynorphin isn't very much like heard of the way cortisol might be, but it's basically the opposite of endorphins. And it makes us feel very low and sad. Like very low and sad, right? And so most of the time we have a drink and maybe say you're only going to have the one drink, you might feel those stress hormones come in at 40 minutes after the drink or so. And it starts to maybe feel a little uncomfortable, maybe you feel a little on edge. Most people just reach for another drink, right? And so you keep drinking, push that kind of away. A lot of people feel those stress hormones pop in the middle of the night. You wake up at 3, 4 a.m. You might remember when, before you stop drinking. And you have the biggest anxiety. You're totally ashamed of yourself. You're like, oh my gosh, again, you're ruminating about everything that's wrong in your life, right? That's all that dynorphin in your mind. It's not you. It's not actually you, right? This is the chemical cocktail that alcohol releases. And then sometimes people feel it also then the next day. So you have more anxiety, more negative thinking the next day. We actually process ethanol. There's this byline that we process a drink every hour. No, not like after the age of 18. It takes about 48 hours to process ethanol completely out of your body. It is a poison. So your body has to prioritize processing that alcohol first before it does anything else. So it is not processing the carbs, the proteins, all the food you ate. It's storing that for later because it has to metabolize that alcohol out of your system first. That is why weight gain is very typical in a drinking lifestyle. And so in addition to now processing that ethanol, you also have the byproducts of ethanol that the body creates, which are also poisonous, and all those stress hormones. Those actually circulate in your body for much longer than just those 48 hours. It can be up to a week, if not even 2 weeks, that you're still dealing with those stress hormones. So basically what was happening for me as someone who drank every weekend is I would get these artificial spikes of this high feeling. And I'll talk about how the dopamine response is also affected by alcohol. And then all of a sudden it would crash on Monday morning and I'd feel so low throughout the week. And then I'd drink again on Friday and get those spikes again. And so alcohol's actually creating the apathy, the feelings of just lowness, the feelings of blah. So that alcohol then becomes alluring again the next time you drink it. When you stop drinking for a break, it actually desensitizes you and you start to really respond to dopamine again. So alcohol does also release dopamine, just like any other drug like cocaine or heroin. And it's really like this high spike in the body. Your brain knows something's wrong. It's like, this is not the natural kind of dopamine I get from, normal natural activities. It knows something is wrong. So what happens over time is dopamine's like a neurotransmitter with receptors that catch it in your brain. Those receptors retract. And so you're actually becoming desensitized to those artificial spikes of dopamine and the natural spikes of dopamine. So they found that people who drink alcohol have much less natural dopamine in their bodies and their brains circulating than people who do not drink. Alcohol also lowers our GABA and serotonin, other two neurotransmitters that make us feel happy. So basically, in just a nutshell, our stress hormones go way up, our happiness neurotransmitters go way down, and we just think that that's what normal adulthood feels like. When you take a break from alcohol, and it's going to differ from person to person, but let's say around the 4 to 6 week mark, your neurotransmitters really rebalance. The body's cleared out all those stress hormones. You feel high, from life. The clouds make you feel happy. The, puppy makes you feel happy. Things that are more mundane are all of a sudden bringing you more joy in your life. And it's this incredible feeling because, again, we look to alcohol as a society for fun, but it actually diminishes our sense of joy in every other moment. And so that, I think, to me, when I not only experienced that firsthand, but also learned the science about it, that to me was just wow, I don't know if I could ever go back to something that actually neurologically makes me feel sad and anxious and is stealing my joy when natural living, most adults, if they start drinking at the age of 18 or 21, we actually don't even know what it feels like in our natural mental states if alcohol is always a present force. Even if we're only drinking once a week or, even once every 2 weeks, it's still always messing with us, which is really fascinating. There's a lot of cool things that also happen when you remove alcohol. Because it affects every system in your body, there are studies that show that even just 5 weeks off alcohol will lower your blood pressure, will lower your blood cholesterol, will lower inflammation across your body, will lower cancer markers in your body, will have brain matter grow in your brain, which is really cool because alcohol is really heavily implicated in dementia and Alzheimer's and all those kinds of things. People who drink, even regular normal drinkers, have actual more holes in their brain. Dr. Daniel Ammon has proven with all of his work. And so when you take a break, the healing mechanism goes on so quickly that like people get off medication, they lose weight, because alcohol thwarts your metabolism so much, people can lose a lot of weight. Like the benefits are insane. And those are just the physical benefits, right? We could go on and on also too, to talk more about the mind and the spirit benefits that I think result as well.
Listeners, when we release video of this episode, you'll see my jaw drop at some of the stuff that Karolina just said, because you literally just described like things that I've experienced myself. I never understood why I would wake up at like 3 a.m. and be like disoriented, anxiety, depression, like the whole bit. And even like the physical, the next morning, I remember I used to be shaking. Like my hands would be shaking. And I had a friend that was like, oh, just drink Gatorade. Like that's just dehydration. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's crazy that this is literally what's going on in your body. And then the part that's really mind blowing is that like you have the folks that are like, well, I just drink wine at dinner. And it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm just having it with my meal. It's fine. It's healthy. The doctor said it's okay for me to drink wine every single day. But then the reality of it is your body will never know what it's like to not have alcohol running through it. Yeah. That's blowing me away. The fact that you said like, your body is going to try to process the alcohol first. Well, that means like my friends, if you are going through, like I've been on a weight loss journey for, most of my life. If you're trying to balance your hormones or you're trying to have a weight loss journey, you're trying to get healthier, like alcohol is going to slow everything else down. Like it's going to take away from everything else that could be happening. And then the other part that I wanted to talk about too, is there a difference? And I wanted to ask you this, is there a difference between like, high-end alcohol versus just like, everyday Joe Schmo alcohol that we're getting at the store? It's all alcohol. It's having the same effect on our system, right?
Yeah. So, people like to think that maybe it's like some other properties of the beer or wine that's doing that. And maybe obviously there are some effects from like low quality or, conventionally pesticide sprayed stuff or whatever. But ethanol is ethanol, right? Ethanol is the same thing we put on our gas fuel, rocket fuel, paint thinner. It is like that chemical, and that is what we are drinking. And you cannot drink 100% alcohol. You would go blind and you would throw up before it even like went down into your stomach. Like we are literally talking about a chemical poison, right? And so like that is, I think it's, and I tried this too, because like as I got more mindful and more healthy as I got older, I knew that I didn't like the effects of alcohol. So I was always trying to make these rules like, okay, well, maybe don't have an IPA. Maybe there's something about IPAs that make you feel weird, or maybe don't do this or don't do that. And da-da-da. It didn't matter, right? You know what I mean? It really didn't matter as long as you're drinking that ethanol. It is the same thing, and it is that poison. And, you bring up a lot of really good topics as well, because it really does wreak havoc too on women's hormones. It really increases estrogen and lowers testosterone, which can make you more estrogen dominant, but then also, have like less of that sex drive and so many other things that testosterone is needed for. So it's very like horrible for hormones. A lot of hormone experts are already talking about this as well, because I think just the knowledge is coming out. Because then you also mentioned, how we think red wine is good for the heart. And so we have this kind of like thing from doctors, oh, drink red wine. Back in my research, and I follow the scientific like studies on this and all that kind of stuff. There was one doctor back in the 90s who was trying to explain the French paradox. And that is the idea that, French people eat a lot of fat and meat, but they'd have lower heart disease than Americans. And he was like, oh, it must be the red wine, right? And so basically one doctor tricked an entire generation into thinking red wine is good for your heart. And then they started finding these studies that proved it and correlated it. A lot of alcohol industries paid for those studies. So everyone was like, red wine's so good for the heart. We're going to start drinking it every day at dinner. That's fine. That's normal. And all of a sudden around 2016, we start getting these meta-analysis studies that really take all of those studies and find like if there's flaws or what's going on. And they noticed that they were not like testing moderate drinkers against non-drinkers. They were testing moderate drinkers against people who were sick, against people who had quit because they had been drinking like way, way, way too much and already had the health complications from that. So they started to, take out these flawed studies, and they found there is no correlative benefit with moderate drinking for the heart. It actually increases heart disease because it raises our blood pressure. It raises our heart rate. Our heart beats faster when we're drinking alcohol, but there's no related exercise to it, which means it's harder for the heart to pump oxygen to the body. And over time, it makes it sag and tired over time. It also raises cholesterol because of the inflammation that's involved as well. So it's like people who drink, like they have higher risk of heart disease. And it's very interesting because there's studies around like how many people alcohol kills every year. And they're now starting to recognize that it's not just alcohol related diseases that kill people, it's the cancers and the heart diseases that are related to alcohol that need to also be counted too. And I just think that's kind of insane that like we as a society don't know. There are doctors and researchers right now who are petitioning to get cancer labels put on alcohol because for women, for example, 2 drinks a week. And I'm sorry, but 2 drinks a week back when I was a drinker sounds pretty
like
good, pretty minimal.
Yeah.
2 drinks a week for a woman raises our breast cancer rate by 15%. I didn't know that. Right? It raises our risk for all kinds of different cancers as well, right? So it's just fascinating. Once you kind of start peeling back the cultural kind of layers of like, drinking's normal and having a glass of red wine a day is good for you, which also then ruins your sleep. Our sleep cycles, we were meant to have about 5 to 6 REM sleep cycles every night. Drinking just 1 glass of wine will reduce those to 1 to 2 cycles. So back when I drank, I was so protective of my sleep. I'd always try to get 8 hours of sleep, but those 8 hours were so low quality. I still woke up tired the next day. So the sense of energy you have when you remove alcohol, the sense of like passion and fire that comes out, this like more raw state, before this kind of drug that is affecting our body, is affecting our mind. It's really beautiful to witness. And I think that's what the point of this conversation is to just allow people to see it like as an experiment that allows you to tap into, a certain feeling, a certain state, a certain energy that you maybe not experienced before. And it doesn't have to be about thinking like, oh, I have to quit drinking forever. But what if you try it and you actually like this so much better? Like, what if the feelings of joy and pure raw excitement and just like that energy you feel is so much better than a little 20-minute buzz that then you crash after? You know what I mean?
I want to highlight something for the listeners because you said something really important here. It was one scientist that did a study that ended up being a flawed study where they were saying like, oh, red wine is good for your heart. There was one scientist that said red wine is good for your heart. And then it went in that time, let's call it viral, because essentially there was no viral then, but this would have been the news that went viral. And you also highlighted something else. The alcohol industry picked up on this and then did their own quote unquote studies and paraded out experts that said, oh no, it's fine. We're all set. We did these studies, but the studies were flawed. The reason why I want to hone in on this is because I say this on a lot of episodes, Karolina. It's incredibly important to me. I want the listeners to hear this. You have to look into this stuff yourself. You cannot trust when they say clinical studies have been done. You really have to look at it. And I say this from a perspective from somebody who participates in clinical studies for my professional daytime job. And I know that even in healthcare, clinical studies are incredibly flawed. They don't even include women or minorities in clinical studies. We really need to, as a group here, and I want my listeners to be part of this movement, you have to advocate for yourself. You have to look into this. Just because it's out there doesn't necessarily mean that it's legitimate. There's always new information being released. So I want to just highlight that for a moment. Now, bringing it back to what you just said, when someone stops the alcohol, now for us, it was a health related, situation. My husband's stomach was going and I was obese and we were just trying to figure things out and get into a better space. So we stopped drinking. And we saw definitive shifts in ourselves. Our relationship got better. Like how I was as a mother, as a professional, like things fell into place much more smoothly. Now I think it's been about, I want to say like 5 or 6 years since we stopped. This past year was the first time where we were like, oh, you know what? Like let's have, like, we can have a drink. Like, let's do it. And I was like, well, I'll only do it if you'll do it. And it was one of those back and forth things. So we finally decided to do it, like literally a couple weeks ago. This is what I was explaining this to Karolina when we were first chatting. So I'm going to tell the listeners about it. A couple weeks ago, we were like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's just have a drink. It was my husband's birthday. We're like, yeah, like we'll do it. I had 2 drinks and I think he had like 2 or 3. And first one, like you said, there was like a little, I haven't drank in so long. There was a almost immediate buzz, but then there was definitely almost like a dip where I was like, it felt off, but I was like, we're with my family. I'm having a good time. Like, I'll go with the flow here. But it like slowed all my senses down. My usual, like how I am, very like, I don't want to say energized at all times, but I'm always like, I'm on top of things. I kind of like lost my path a little bit. But the interesting thing that I had talked to Karolina about off on this offline was I didn't feel right for like a week, and neither did my husband. We fell off. Like, we just didn't feel good, like physically, mentally, like we just did not feel ourselves. And that's because of that second life. So when you give up alcohol, the doors that open up for you, you were talking about your mind and your body and your spirit. Like what has that been like in your experience with your coaching?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think we can start to like really hone in on the physical benefits. Those seem a little obvious once we kind of spell them out. But I think what people don't then grasp is like the emotional and then spiritual and soulful benefits as well. I think something that's really beautiful that happens is that you go on a really big self-discovery journey, because whether drinking is something that you do to fit in or drinking is something you do to regulate emotions, like there's so much growth that's going to come into reevaluating your relationship with alcohol. And what, it kind of immediately happens too is that, like, first of all, you're waking up feeling good. Like, it starts to build up your self-love in the sense of like, wow, like yesterday's version of me, like, looked out for me. Like she ensured that I'd have a good sleep and wake up feeling well. And that starts to build self-esteem as well. Like, you're not breaking your rules to yourself, right? Like, a lot of people who try to drink moderately are always playing with some kind of rule book, right? You know what I mean? And sometimes those get broken, and then you feel that disregard for your self-trust and your ability to be in integrity with yourself. So it's like you're showing up for yourself every single day, and every single day is like a check mark of like, oh, I've never gone this long without drinking, right? That starts to breed this kind of self-confidence as well of like, whoa, look at me. Like, I've never done something like this before. Like, this is insane. And I think that self-confidence starts to spill out into other areas, because if you never thought you could take this long a break from alcohol before, it's probably other areas in your life that you didn't think you could do something. And now you're starting to question that stuff. For example, I never thought I could be an entrepreneur. So I was really shy growing up. I'm really introverted. I'm very foreign. I was like the last person you would think of as an entrepreneur. And I thought entrepreneurs were these like techie Silicon Valley schmoozers with angel investors type of people, right? So I never even allowed myself to explore that idea or that identity. And all of a sudden in my, break from alcohol, I'm like, wait, why not me? Why not me, right? I started getting these ideas. I also started feeling like a sense of courage. I think going alcohol free or taking an extended break from alcohol in a society that glamorizes alcohol so much will immediately build your courage muscle. Ordering a mocktail at a bar takes courage. Telling your friends you're not drinking that night takes courage. Standing up and saying like, I feel so much better without alcohol. No, thank you. Like, that all takes a lot of courage. And that courage is the courage that you also need for the next big step in your life, the next big move that you make. I feel like also when people finally allow their emotions to really be there and be present through them, we start to learn from them instead of just numbing them and shoving them down. So I find a lot of women who are maybe dissatisfied with their career or not fulfilled in their job or not as fulfilled in other parts of their lives. And instead of drinking over it, which is so normalized, we start to ask ourselves like, well, what do I really want? Right. And we start using that gift of confidence and self-esteem and courage and the gratitude and the presence and all these incredible mental benefits that are coming from taking that break from alcohol into actually believing in this new reality and taking action steps towards it. Right. I've met so many people, so many people who go on this journey and go go on to quit their job, or go on this journey and go on to launch the business of their dreams, or go on this journey and grow their business 10 times over because of all the new like sparks of, you know, the intuition, the creativity goes a lot more up as well, which is insane to see. Like you're on fire for life. And what's interesting, Jenny, is that I actually don't care whether people drink or not. Like, it's not about being a police or some kind of morality issue. It's not about the alcohol at the end of the day. That's just the vehicle that when you do go alcohol free, it's this incredible benefits that you're exploding in your life. And that fire and that passion is, I think, what really wakes people up to their deeper purpose in life. Like, I don't want to just snooze through life and do the same thing over and over and over again. I really want to live, whether that's going after that dream or, you know, moving somewhere beautiful or traveling more. It's that sense of, wow, like, let's take this life and grasp it and really take it full forward. I find the spiritual benefits really beautiful too, where you're more connected with your own intuition, whether that's, you know, the voice from above or your own higher self, which is really beautiful, and you trust it more, you take those leaps of faith more. I feel the relationships can get better as well because you're so present. And, you know, even with like a partner who maybe is still drinking, for example, let's say you stop drinking and they continue drinking, it kind of also reevaluates how you guys bond together. And now you have to like re-bond and kind of find quality time in different ways, which is very fascinating and interesting. You also learn to have more boundaries and have, you know, stop people pleasing, especially if you're like drinking socially and stuff like that. So in just the growth sense, it will grow you into a new version of yourself. And think about it. We were never meant to be the 20-year-old versions of ourselves. And that's probably when we picked up drinking. And so it becomes this outdated habit, this outdated pattern that is not serving the woman we want to become. And there's so many movers and shakers up there in society that I look up to: Tony Robbins, Brene Brown, Deepak Chopra, Gabby Bernstein, you know, so many others I can name. They do not drink. And to me, it's almost like the secret to success. When you unleash so much fire and passion, and, you know, Tony Robbins doesn't have time to drink. He's got so many lives he's meant to change in this lifetime, right? And you start to see it as this pattern that people do when they want to be alive and awake and on purpose and successful in their lives. It stops being about this weakness, like, oh, I can't drink because sometimes I overdo it. It starts being like, actually, alcohol is a way to keep us very numb as a society and just stuck in the status quo. And I know that can sound kind of crazy on the outset, but like, you really fire up your sense of rebellion and independence and really start questioning what you want your life to mean in this lifetime and have your own personal choices. And I see it so much over and over again. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. You know what I mean? And taking a break from alcohol is just the vehicle there. If there was a different vehicle there, I'd probably be promoting that. But I've just seen that happen so many times over and over again. It's so worth going on that journey.
You said so many things that I've thought to myself. I mean, it's amazing to hear your how passionate you are about this, because it is subduing us as a society, you know, and that I want to hone in on that, because as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh my God, like, I've actually, my husband and I talk about that quite a bit. We're like, you know, it feels almost like an intentional, like, purpose that's being targeted at us for whatever reason that people have to do that, that is lowering our ability to really be living our authentic lives. And all the conversations that I've been having for this fall series have really almost surrounded around this idea that women, I mean, men are included in here too, but we're focused on the ladies. So like, women, we get this messaging that's like, especially as moms, oh, mommy wine club. Oh, let's do girls wine night. You know, oh, haha, my kids are driving me crazy, so I'm drinking all day long. Like, and it's become almost acceptable and expected of women to kind of lean into this wine trap. And then you're like, oh, I'm the only one who's not doing this, or I'm the anomaly. I'm not funny because I don't do this. The amount of connections I've made, and the quality of the connections that I've made, and the quality of people that I'm in touch with now. And I know it's not solely because the alcohol is no longer present in my life, but that's an element of it. And it allows you to take these bigger steps. All the people that you mentioned that you follow, like, I follow all these folks, like, I am all in with them, because you're right. Like, there is an element where one of the, I call her my guru, but like, the woman that I was engaging with like 2 years ago, that really like was the person that helped me to shift my whole life. She had encountered an issue with it. She's highly enlightened, and she was starting to, during the pandemic, have a glass of wine every day because she was like feeling low in the afternoons. Well, this didn't help. And then she noticed that it was becoming a pattern and a problem. So she gave it up altogether. She was like, this can't be it. Like, I have so much more to do. Much like what you said about Tony Robbins. Like, there's so much more to do. I think a big barrier for people, especially women, because we have that people pleasing component, is the whole social element of it. Because as you said, when you are the person that's saying, I don't drink, and you have to tell people that, oh, we actually don't drink alcohol, the response is always a little awkward. People don't seem to know what to say to that. And everyone always asks us, like, we tell people, we had a party here at our house in the beginning of summer. It was like summer kickoff, but it was no alcohol because we don't drink alcohol. And it was a kids' party. All the parents kind of show up, and a few of them brought cases with them. And I graciously accepted. I was like, where would you like me to put this? Would you like this? Like, do you want me to put it in ice? And they're like, oh no, it's for you. And I was like, well, we actually don't drink, so I'll put it out for you if you like. And it was almost like this, like, oh, you don't? And it became kind of like this thing. There's been instances when my husband and I have people come over, or if we're out, like, where we'll get mocktails, or I'll get like water with lime. And because you can't tell what it is, and it's not even for me, but it seems to make people feel more comfortable. They feel, and I do it just kind of like, all right, well, keeping it even, it doesn't bother me, and I don't do it that much, so it doesn't matter. But that social element, I think, is what deters a lot of people, because they're afraid that if I give up drinking, my friends all drink, like, I'm going to be by myself. Everyone's going to be having fun and I'm not having fun, or I'm going to lose my friends altogether because, we're not going to relate anymore. And I think on that note, and you're probably going to say it, it's like, well, then are these people really meant to be in your life? So I'm sure that you have a lot on the social element of it too.
Yeah, you bring up so many good things, and like, it goes to the core of like who we are as humans, because, belonging is very important to us. We would not have survived as hunter-gatherers if we didn't belong to a tribe. It literally meant death if you were cast out right there. So we have made it to mean, and this is completely a concept, right? It's not like a real thing. It's just a cultural concept right now in time, that the belonging is found through drinking, camaraderie and fun. And let's all get together and have this shared ritual, and none of us will question it, and we'll all just do it, and we'll all wake up feeling gross tomorrow, but whatever, right? And so it is like, kind of gets to the core of like, well, what happens when I'm the odd one out, right? Like, what happens if, will people reject me? Will people like be, triggered by this? These are really valid points, right? And for some of us, well, I'm an introvert. So like, drinking was my way to confidence. Drinking was my way to gregariousness and feeling more popular at like a party and stuff like that. So that's also a whole other core element that comes up. And so I think we have to recognize too that just around today in 2024, about 30% of Americans do not drink, which has grown so much over the last few years because of this alcohol-free movement. The other 52% of Americans actually want to drink less or not at all. Right? They're secretly admitting to that, but they're not yet sometimes conscious enough of it to do anything about it. So when you go to that party, when you go to that shindig and everybody's drinking or asking you about it, or you're, all that kind of weird stuff, you have to rightfully assume that about at least half of these people here actually wish that they drank less or not at all. So what does that mean? You are no longer the odd one out. You are the role model. You are the leader. You are the one who's actually inspiring other people. Now, this can come off with different responses. Some people will genuinely be curious and like maybe they're thinking about it too, and they just kind of want to ask questions of you to kind of get at the root of it. Some people will be triggered. They're not yet emotionally mature enough to recognize that this is something they desire. So they're like backlashing against it. Wait, what? You don't drink? Do you have a problem? They get into that kind of thing. That is a huge red flag. It means you're talking to someone who has deep insecurities about their own drinking. And then there's the people who don't care, right? It could matter less what you have in your glass. It's almost so silly to think like, if you go to a barbecue and you're vegetarian and everyone has like chicken wings and you get like the salad and the vegetables, like, are people going to judge you and like, just stare you down based on what you have on your plate? Yes, maybe in some like places and cultures, but like, who cares? It's food on a plate, right? And sometimes we have to be so flippant about alcohol. Like, who cares what beverage is in my glass? It's not what makes us a friendship or like actually has any meaning in life whatsoever when people are kind of judging you against that. So when you kind of step into that role, I think of being more thinking of it as the inspirer, the role model. I think what you find happens is those relationships over time get curious about it. Like a lot of my friends have gone on to either take extended breaks from alcohol or go alcohol free. And plus this like trajectory for me of like completely changing my identity from, I used to work in a cubicle when I was drinking. Now I'm like a 7-figure entrepreneur. People get inspired by also the life changes as a result too. So at first they're all questioning it. And then a few years later, they're like, oh, can you tell me about that? Because now I'm interested about it, right? And so holding that kind of space for that, I think, is important in your own kind of like courage and maturity to just like understand people's responses actually mean nothing about you whatsoever. But then also to recognize that like when you are moving through things like that, you are giving permission for other people to question alcohol as well. Because I'll tell you, if I was at a party 10 years ago and I saw someone not drinking and having a good time, my brain would have been like, wait a minute, you're allowed to do that? Like I literally didn't even think it was allowed, right? And so I think we also are like really creating ripple effects by just showing up and being like, yes, I'm fun and I'm bubbly and I like to dance alcohol free. And like it kind of twists people up with their kind of preconceived notions of like what fun has to look like. And I think it's fascinating as a society that, we marry alcohol to fun, because when we were kids, we did a lot of things, right? And they didn't involve alcohol. We climbed trees and we put on plays and we went rollerblading and rode bikes and went swimming. And as adults, now we get so myopic that the only version of fun we have now has to revolve around alcohol. Like if I said the same thing about, oh, it has to involve cocaine or heroin, like we would think that's sad, right? Yeah. It's almost like you're missing out on the beauty of this world and all it has to offer by being so single-minded to do the same thing over and over and over again. We think drinking is interesting, but it's a very similar experience. Like you feel the same feelings, you do the same thing. You're sitting in a bar, you're sitting at a table, you're sitting on a couch, like you're not doing very much, right? And I think what we do as adults then is like, we expect this drink to make fireworks go off in our brain, and that feels like fun instead of creating our fun, instead of actually being active agents in our fun. And I think sometimes when you ask someone like, what do you find fun? What brings you organic joy? Most adults can't even answer that question. They're so out of touch with that. And so part of the exploration into removing alcohol from your life is actually to rediscover what brings me joy, what is fun for me. And that can even go into socializing as well. Maybe going to networking events with 200 people isn't your cup of tea. Maybe you love to have one-on-one conversations over coffee and can go really deep. A lot of my friendships went even deeper when I went alcohol free because it wasn't so surface level anymore. We really were able to talk about things that matter. And you get to define what your social life looks like and those meaningful connections to you. If you want to go to bed at 9 a.m. because that feels more natural to you, then that's like what your body and your brain wants, right? So it's sometimes okay to be different than the expected kind of norms around you. And I promise you, like the alcohol-free movement, it's kind of what happened to cigarettes, because all the studies are coming out now. There's so much growing in the alcohol-free beverage industry. There's so many more books and leaders talking about sobriety. Gen Z is drinking less than everybody else before them. I think that it's really going to go the way of cigarettes in the sense that yes, people still smoke cigarettes these days, but it's kind of a fringe activity for the most part. It's not mainstream anymore. And I can see alcohol going the same way. So it's like, do you want to be at the front end of the bell curve as like the trendsetter and the one that like people look up to? Or do you want to be the last straggler, right? When everybody changes and it's like, oh, you're still drinking? You know what I mean? So it's like, there's almost like a pride you can wear when you go to a party and you know you're going to wake up feeling fabulous tomorrow and everyone else is going to wake up a little like worse for wear. And they're going to be jealous about you for it secretly.
It's interesting because when I was, as you're talking, I'm thinking through like, in your 20s or earlier in some people's cases that they start drinking, it's drinking alcohol has this like glittery, glamorous, like, and, in social media, it's being glamorized like to death. It's like horrendous. And so you buy into this whole ideal of the whole thing. My husband and I had this conversation where we were talking about, like we understand, like, yeah, you buy into it when you're younger. Let's hope not, we're trying to gear our kids a different way. But like we both bought into it pretty heavily when we were young. And we felt very much like we had outgrown it. Like after we gave it up and we saw, like, we felt the benefits, we felt the change. We're like, we're not going back. Like, that's it. And we were not heavy, but we were daily drinkers. Like it was, when I was cooking, I was either drinking wine or drinking beer. Like that's on a daily. That was a regular thing. And now like he's in his very late 40s. He's almost 50. And I just got into my 40s. And to us, like we've talked about this few instances where we've seen people out and they're same age range as us drinking quite heavily. And it's not to judge the situation because everyone's on their own journey, but it almost like shocked me a little bit to see it because I'm like, similar to like when you see people smoking cigarettes, it's like, we already know this is bad. Like, why are you still doing it? Like, it's literally bad. Like, we know it's bad. And the same note with alcohol, we were like, aren't you too old to be acting like this? Like, shouldn't you like have let this go? Like, again, like when you're young and you're buying into it and you think like this is the only way to go and everyone's doing it and I'm going to jump on this wagon. Like we understand getting lost at that point, but then it's like, as you get older, like, haven't you had that aha moment yet of like light bulb, like, oh, I don't need to go down this path. I can blaze my own trail here. And as you said, like, well, number one, I have to say, I can't ever picture you as an introvert, like at all. Like, I know we don't know each other like super well, but I just can't picture that because your energy is like on fire. And I feel like it's because you have lit yourself up. You walked away from alcohol and you have really leaned into developing yourself and to blazing your own trail. And it has opened up so many doorways to you that you've left this introvert behind and become this like flowery, beautiful like being. Like it's tremendous to hear you describe yourself like that. Was kind of shocking for me because I can't even picture, like I picture you giving like speeches and being on a podium, and I'm picturing you doing like keynote talks for people because this information is so critical. We're being fed this whole promotional marketing package, which by the way, a lot of what you talked about is marketing. The messaging is in our movies. It's in commercials. It's in television shows. It's in Netflix series. It's everywhere. It's in songs. Like it is everywhere. The message is always under there. Like, oh, alcohol equals fun. Alcohol equals a good time, and people just associate like, oh, I'm going to go to the beach. Let me bring a case of beer with me and we can all hang out. It's like, we all go to the beach and have a great time, but we don't have alcohol. We just hang out. Like you can have fun without it. And you will have the fun and then also be able to still be you and continue on doing all these amazing things that you're doing. It's mind-boggling to me that, it didn't catch on sooner. I'm glad it's catching on now, though. That's wonderful to hear. Like the Gen Zs, like awesome. I'm an old millennial. Like I'm an old millennial. So I'm very happy to hear about that.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a lot of really good points that like we are marketed alcohol our whole lives, even before drinking age. We are seeing people doing it around us. It's in movies and TVs. And so what we do, I mean, I like to think of it this way. Alcohol is nothing more than a fermented beverage in a glass, right? And we as a society attach all this meaning to it. Alcohol is now equals relaxation. Alcohol equals fun. Alcohol equals belonging. Alcohol equals glamour, sophistication, relaxation, rebellion even, right? Like when you're in your college years, you're like, I'm rebelling, right? Is it really that rebellious to do what everybody's doing? Right? It's so funny. And so like we put on all these beliefs. And so when I'm helping people change their relationship with alcohol, like just removing the habit isn't going to serve them very long. Like it's not this just like white knuckled, like don't drink kind of situation. It's really kind of unpacking all those beliefs we have about how alcohol serves us. Because if we don't believe alcohol brings us any benefits or comfort or any like, makes us have a higher status in society because we know our wines or whatever, you know what I mean? We start to unpeel and unpack the like illusion of alcohol. And we find that it has nothing but those negative benefits. And then the illusions pop, the desires also pop. So like, it's not that you can't drink, it's you literally don't want to, right?
Yeah,
exactly. And that's true freedom. That's true freedom because otherwise we're operating in this conditioned, totally programmed response. Nobody's born on this planet wanting to drink alcohol, right? That was programmed into us and you can deprogram that as well. If you want to get like a start, I do recommend my book, Euphoric Ditch Alcohol, Gain a Happier, More Confident You for that. We also have programs that go really deep into completely rewiring the subconscious mind from some of those beliefs because it's so freeing when you remove all of them. And what's interesting is like like you're saying, like the alcohol industry operates very similar to the way the cigarette industry does, in that it targets young people on purpose before our brains are fully formed, when we're insecure, when having a drink in college or whatnot is, not only gets you that belonging, but also it's like you're fighting your own little insecurities back then. You're not this grown up that can manage her emotions yet. You're not someone who's like regulated in life yet and has like a career and stability, right? They target young people for a reason, and then they want you to have the habit for the rest of your life, just like cigarette smoking is, right? And it's ridiculous, like the way that the industry operates. They found some really shady practices in that. And so again, it's not like to be all conspiracy theory or anything, but it's kind of just questioning these things, like, and just kind of asking yourselves that, do the practices of society, really fit me? I mean, there's some really crazy practices of medieval societies that used to happen that were totally normal, right? That we now look at and are like, that was wild. How did anyone buy into that? And so it's kind of just being the same thing. It's being someone who's willing to be a questioner, independent, and try things their own way based on their own intuition, not even anything I say or you say. Like, listen to your own intuition on this one, right? And try it out if it feels exciting to you, and start to kind of like unpack what alcohol means to you. And I love what you said too about like confidence and me and introversion, because, when I used alcohol to become an extrovert at parties, I thought that it was giving me confidence. But not only did I embarrass myself sometimes, not only did I have those wine stains on my teeth and stuff, but, I also was telling my subconscious like a deeper, darker message. It was, Karolina, you're not good enough. Like, you can't talk to people. You have nothing interesting to say. Nobody wants to listen to you. But here, have this drink and then you'll be better. Then you'll be the version of yourself you really want to be. And you know how much that actually erodes your esteem, like subconsciously, without even knowing it. And so when I did go alcohol free, I had to learn confidence. I had to learn that intrinsic, comfortability in my skin away from alcohol. And obviously, like you said, the results are there, and I've developed that. And that has been something that no one can take away from me. And it's built within me, not outside of me, by using a flimsy little Band-Aid like alcohol that actually just robs your confidence and your esteem over time. So it's kind of almost this like question, like, who could you become? Who are you really? What's your true potential without this like thing in your life? And it's a fascinating question. I remember I was in Japan. I'd never really thought to quit drinking. It was always this break, that I considered, right? And I think that makes it really low stakes, in the sense that like your rebellious part of your brain isn't like, oh my God, what are you doing? Let's not do this. It's just like, hey, chill out. We're just taking a break, right? And so I remember I was 70 days alcohol free in Japan, and I had booked this trip before I took this break from alcohol. So the first day I'd actually booked a like bar and food tour. So it came with alcohol and food. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Right? Like, I didn't even decide yet at that point. And we go to the first bar, and there's like a beer placed in front of me. And I'm like, you know what? I've been feeling the most awe, the most like wonder, appreciation, confidence, pure energy, just these incredible feelings manifesting in my life. And I know that the second I have that beer, all of those feelings are going to go away. And for what? A beer I've had like thousands of times in my life. I know what the beer tastes like. I know what it feels like. I know how I feel the next day. There's nothing special about it. But this other path, I don't know where that's going to lead. And, just to like have a little backstory, I worked in a cubicle. I used alcohol as, something to look forward to every weekend. I was not fulfilled with my career, and going alcohol free has led me to find that deeper fulfillment, run a coaching business that I absolutely love, become a best-selling author, speak on stages, travel the world hosting retreats, and actually finding fulfillment and helping people and being of service, and finding that my dream lifestyle manifests through that as well. Like, it's a night and day difference of who I used to be. And I think that sense of like what's possible on this route, that I had that epiphany in Japan, opened the doors blazingly to the biggest dreams, the biggest vision, and a life full of true meaning and impact. Then just sitting around a bar and drinking. Like, we've all done that, been there, done that. Maybe it's time to, like you said, move on and see what else life has to offer.
I think that was the most powerful thing that you said so much great stuff in this episode, but your example for yourself and how you got to where you're getting, this is the result. So listeners, Karolina is the end result of, and can not end because she still has so much more to do, But this is what you're seeing after like over time, that she's given it up and really focused and fine-tuned herself and her life. And it's given her that space to be able to do that. If alcohol had remained present, she never gave it up, she might still be in the cubicle. And honestly, I never even really looked at it like that. Like, we gave it up for other reasons, and then everything else kind of started flowing. And I was like, well, this is all great. I get, whatever. And I never, we have zero interest in like really picking alcohol back up. Like, we have alcohol in our fridge right now. And earlier this morning, one of my girls was like, what is that? Because they don't ever really see it. And there's like some beers like sitting on the door. And my husband goes, oh, remember like for my birthday, your big brother and your big sister were here. And he explained it. And she was like, yeah. And he was like, that's for them though. Like we don't do that. And she was like, oh, all right. So we're, it doesn't even draw like an interest. Like, it's there. And we can have it anytime, but it's just because you've come so far, because we've come so far, it's like, no, I don't really want to go back down that path. Like, it seems like a loss of life. This is so incredibly important. Listeners, I'm going to link all of Karolina's links. I want you guys to check out the book too, because that book is amazing. Like, I have mine. So I'm like, I love buying the books. I highly recommend looking into this. Even if you like Karolina said, like, take a baby step, do 1 week, do a week or 2 weeks, and see how you feel removing it from the equation and what it does for you. I mean, it could really just change the rest of your life. So, I mean, strong recommend to give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Karolina, thank you so much for joining the episode and for sharing everything with the listeners today. I greatly appreciate it, and I know they appreciate it too.
Thank you so much.
Listeners, thank you for being with us today, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.